Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And we'll attempt to share the screen. Welcome to our September 24th Zoom Satsang. Our first topic, climbing the ladder of consciousness. And we're continuing with part 6. When it comes to climbing the ladder of consciousness and experiencing higher states of consciousness, the general approach that modern teachers take is to focus on stimulating your higher chakras, perhaps in as short a period as a weekend seminar. The covers of popular books on chakras on Amazon.com promote the idea that through meditation techniques given in the book, you can awaken your chakras and the Kundalini, develop your psychic abilities, clairvoyance, healing, and increase energy. Sounds pretty good. We will begin with more thoughts from Gurudeva on the importance of starting with the basics. The material is from the Merging with Shiva lesson, Foundations for Fruitful Yoga. Before we do that, I wanted to be sure everyone was clear on certain terminology that is used throughout this lesson. And from Merging with Shiva, the eternal path is divided naturally into 4 separate categories. The Bhagavad Gita, the popular book which you all know from your studies in Vedanta, and which has made Hindu philosophy well known in America, defines these as 4 separate, non-progressive paths. Separate, non-progressive paths. And we all know what they are: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. In Agamic scripture, these are defined a little differently and are considered to be 4 stages of a progressive path, termed Charya, Kriya, Yoga, and Jnana. And the question to you is, what is the important difference between these 2 approaches? Have our dog commenting there? Wonder what he said. Whereas in Vedanta you can choose to follow just one of the yogas, in Siddanta we need to pass through all 4 padas. Vedanta, choose one. Siddanta, pass through all 4. Then we have the analogy. A simple analogy will illustrate the difference. The goal is to walk across a shallow stream on a path of river rocks. Vedanta gives us 4 separate rock paths to choose from, one for each of the 4 yogas, all of which lead across the stream. Siddanta gives us only one path for crossing the river, which consists of 4 stones: Charya, Kriya, Yoga, and Jnana. According to the Agamic tradition, these 4 categories are the natural sequence of the soul's evolutionary process, much like the development of a butterfly from egg to larva, larva to caterpillar, from caterpillar to pupa, and then the final metamorphosis, from pupa to butterfly. Every butterfly, without exception, will follow this pattern of development. And every soul will mature through Charya to Kriya, through Kriya to Yoga, and into Jnana. Charya, or Karma Yoga, may be simply defined as service. Kriya, or Bhakti Yoga, is devotion. Yoga, or Raja Yoga, is meditation. And Jnana is the state of wisdom reached toward the end of the path as the result of God realization and the subsequent enlivened Kundalini and unfoldment of the chakras through the practices of yoga. The soul does not move quickly from one stage to another. It is a deliberate process, and within each stage there exist vast libraries of knowledge containing the sum of thousands of years of teachings unraveling that particular experiential vista. One more term we need to know is one that was coined by Gurudeva, Anava Marga. It is the path of ignorance, the path of egoity, separateness, self-indulgence, self-interest, and selfishness. Now to the lesson. Many Hindu teachers in the West teach purely Advaitic meditation with no theism or religious practice, but most who have come to the West from India were raised in Hindu homes. They have within them a firm religious cultural foundation for yoga. Many do not pass the religious culture on to their Western devotees. However, in an Orthodox Hindu community, they would most likely teach in a more traditional way. Advaita philosophy is appealing to the Westerner. It does not require a change in lifestyle. The non-dual Advaitic-based meditations do bring the devotees out of the conscious mind, but more often than not lead them into the subconscious. It is here within the subconscious that unresolved problems with family and one's personal ego begin to appear. Without a proper religious cultural background and traditional Hindu belief system, these problems are difficult to handle. This turmoil is certainly not the purpose of Advaitic meditations, but it is a byproduct. Let me share an illustration that I often use. Most of you have heard this many times. Imagine a pond of water with gold nuggets at the bottom. If either the surface of the pond has ripples due to a wind, or the pond itself is cloudy due to the presence of mud, the gold nuggets at the bottom of the pond cannot be seen from above. The ripples on the surface represent an active intellectual mind. The cloudy water represents the impurities in the subconscious mind, and the gold nuggets at the bottom represent our soul nature. The idea is that to experience our soul nature and the oneness with God, we need to pass through the subconscious mind. It needs to be purified in order for us to do so. Back to the Merging with Shiva lesson. The wise guru trains his devotees in traditional Hindu culture and values and teaches the beginning yogas, as well as temple protocol, music, the arts, and dance. All these should be mastered to build a proper subconscious foundation within the mind. Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are the necessary prelude to the higher philosophies and practices. Oh, that's the point of everything we've said so far. Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are the necessary prelude to the higher philosophies and practices. Group meditation is all right, as the group can really help the individual, as does the individual help the group. Intense meditation awakens the samskaras, the impressions of the past, and intensifies the prarabdha karmas, bringing them into manifestation before their time. It has a greenhouse effect. No one should perform intensive meditation alone until he or she can serve selflessly and accept praise and blame and criticism without complaint or resentment, but with a sweet smile. Only when a devotee has reached this stage is he or she firmly on the Kriya Marga, which will lead quite naturally to the Yoga Marga. Then finally, Raja Yoga and other kinds of more refined, intensive sadhanas can safely be performed. These will clean up the karmas of the past without mental pain, once the proper foundation has been set within the mind and character of the devotee. The progressive sadhanas of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and then Raja Yoga, or Charya, Kriya, and Yoga, are like clearing a path of its stones. First you remove the big stones. Then you walk back along the path. You still see big stones, but they are half the size as the first ones that were removed, and you remove these as well. Then you walk back along the path and remove more stones that stand out as large, and on and on and on until the path is clear. It is a refinement process. This is a great photo. The seeker on the path has to be soft, pliable, easy to get along with, as well as firm-minded. Therefore, bhakti, which is love in action, is a necessary prerequisite to success on the Sanmarga, the straight path to God, toward merger with Shiva. All kinds of yogic techniques can be practiced, but they hold no fruitful rewards for those who are not firm-minded and not strong in the essential virtues. The prideful, antagonistic, and difficult to get along with people must soften their hearts. This is done through bhakti and karma yoga. These practices alone will free the devotee from the anava marga, the path of building up and keeping the personal ego strong. The anava marga is a difficult path to leave for the sanmarga, but the results on the sanmarga are so much more rewarding in the long run. It is often postulated by certain Indian schools of thought that once you reach a certain stage, bhakti should be set aside because it is dual by nature. But a devotee arriving into a high state of consciousness does not give up his love for God and the gods. His devotion does not stop, rather it becomes more intense. He does not stop eating, relating to family, friends, and other devotees. These are all dual things too. Yes, it is true that some teachers preach this doctrine, but to avoid the Charya Marga, having perhaps never been on it and say, I am on a greater and much higher one, I don't have to do that, is another philosophy, not ours. Thank you, Gurudeva. In Siddanta, the Marga are progressive stages of character building. They are a foundation for good character, which is built on bhakti. Proper habit patterns created through the daily sadhanas of karma yoga and bhakti yoga lay this foundation within the mind, body, and emotions. In case a devotee fails in pursuit of the higher yogas, he will always have his success on the Charya Marga to rely upon. For someone to say, I now intellectually understand the Vedas and do not need to express love and devotion, is sad indeed. One who had really realized the truths of the Vedas would never say this. Gurudeva gives a strong warning on avoiding intensifying the lower forces. For individuals who are prone to anger, jealousy, contempt, and retaliation, they should abstain from any of the yogas of japa or exploratory meditation. These will only intensify and prananize the lower chakras that give rise to demonic forces. Rather, they should perform the always healing Vasanada Tantra and confine themselves to karma yoga, such as cleaning in and around the temple and picking flowers for the pujas. These simple acts of charya are recommended, but should not be extended to intense worship. Then and only then their life will be in perspective with the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma and begin to become one with Shiva's perfect universe. Brahmadvara, the door to the 7 chakras below the Muladhara, will then be sealed off as their experiential patterns settle into the traditional perspective of how life should be and each individual should behave within it. Final quote on this subject is a summary of Gurudeva's perspective. In the stages of Charya and Kriya, the deep-seated impurities of the mind are cleansed as past karmas are resolved, and a foundation laid for the 3rd stage on the divine path, that of yoga. Yoga is a very advanced science. It cannot be sustained except by the soul that has unfolded into the fullness of Charya and Kriya and maintains the qualities of service and devotion as meditation is pursued. The devotee who has served God well now embarks upon finding union with God in his sanctum within. He remains enveloped in the dharshan of the personal Lord he carefully cultivated during Charya and Kriya, and on the power of that dharshan he is drawn within by the primal soul himself to a rarefied states of consciousness and the stillness of meditation. And we have a review of the practices mentioned so far. This is going back to the beginning of climbing the ladder of consciousness. 1. Accept that actions have consequences. 2. Virtuous and dutiful living, applying Dharma to your life in 5 ways. 3. Increasing control over anger. And now we can add the one just covered of 4. A foundation of practicing the Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga disciplines of the Charya and Kriya padas. That's the first part of this part. Next is additional material on the nature of anger. Non-injury and anger are closely related. There is a tendency to respond to challenging situations by becoming upset, angry, and finally harming others with our fists or our words. Therefore, understanding and controlling anger is an important part of practicing ahimsa. Chapter 33 of the Tirukkural is entitled Avoidance of Anger. It is in fact the chapter that precedes ahimsa, non-injury, which shows that to successfully practice nonviolence, we need to control anger. Here are 2 verses from this chapter. Forget anger toward all who have offended you, for it gives rise to teeming troubles. Anger kills, the face's smile and the heart's joy. Does there exist a greater enemy than one's own anger? And a story I love to tell. Our monastery is a very controlled spiritual environment, so the first-hand experience of anger is rare. However, a few years ago there was a great opportunity for first-hand observation, which was when 2 carpenters were building a house next door to the monastery. One of the carpenters was more prone to anger than the other. Every few minutes, when something didn't work right, he would start loudly swearing at length. And then about once a month, there would be a huge argument and he would stomp off the job and drive away. It was definitely a very interesting study in anger and human nature. People's natures are quite different in their tendency to anger. Some are usually calm but occasionally flare up. They fit the definition of anger of losing one's temper, where temper refers to composure, calmness of mind. Others anger quite easily and fit the definition of anger of possessing a temper, where temper means angers easily. And then there are people who are quite selective in those they get angry with. perhaps just their spouse. Gurudeva makes an interesting comment on anger in stating that anger is the most difficult fault for people to overcome. What do you think he says is the reason? Why is it the most difficult fault for people to overcome? Because it comes in so many different forms. Pouting, long silences, shouting, yelling, swearing, and more. Interesting insight there. Because it comes in so many different forms. Not just one form. Gurudeva continues by listing the 8 forms of anger from the book Angry All the Time. These are called the 8 rungs on the ladder of violence. Of course, these rungs are going down, not up. Different direction of walking the ladder. And the question to you, what are the 8 forms of anger? See how many you can remember. And we'll see what they are. Sneaky anger, the cold shoulder, blaming and shaming, swearing, screaming, and yelling, demands and threats, chasing and holding, partly controlled violence, and blind rage. Quite a list. We will next look at each rung in more detail. First rung, sneaky anger. You act and speak normally but purposefully neglect to do certain tasks others have asked you to do, pretending that you forgot all about the duties. Example, a teenage boy upset with his father for firmly disciplining him retaliates with sneaky anger by chronically forgetting to do his household chores. And the second rung, the cold shoulder. You shun another person and make it clear you are mad about something. However, you absolutely refuse to let him or her know what it is. Example, a wife is upset with her husband for working late and, rather than talk the issue through, gives him the silent cold shoulder for the entire evening. Third rung, blaming and shaming. You fault others for something that happened and then tell them they are no good in order to make them feel shame. Example, an employee makes a simple mistake at work and her boss is upset. Rather than help resolve the problem, he points blame at her, demeaning and intimidating her with personal criticisms. Fourth rung, swearing, screaming, and yelling. Getting pretty visible here. You lose control over your speech and scream and yell at others. Those who have a habit of swearing are most prone to this form of anger. Example, a teenage girl has admitted to a minor wrongdoing at school. Her teacher, known for his foul mouth, yells at her harshly, using cruel, out-of-control words to punish her. Fifth rung, demands and threats. You demand that others behave as you want them to, or threaten you will do something. Or threaten you will do something drastic if they don't, such as hurt them or yourself. Example, an argument between 2 business partners gets out of hand and reaches the point where the younger threatens to beat up his associate unless he gets his way. Sixth rung, chasing and holding. You approach or pursue others and physically restrain them against their will and prevent them from leaving your presence. Example, a woman's fiancé has been accused of seeing another woman. And since she follows him to work, grabs him desperately, and insists they talk about the problem right now. Seventh rung, Partially controlled violence. You physically strike someone for the purpose of forcing him or her to do what you want, but without losing control. Example, a young boy is caught stealing at a neighbor's home. The owner, outraged, confronts the boy and swats him several times with a stick, wrongly thinking that this will reform the errant youth. 8th wrong. Blind rage. You physically attack a person with total loss of control, to the extent that when you return to normal consciousness, you may not even remember the incident. Example, a sassy teenager deliberately insults an overweight stranger. Instead of just scowling, the fiery man flies into a blind rage and beats him mercilessly. And that ends our first topic. Moving on, our second topic, continuing with looking at character qualities through the approach of positive psychology. As we know, positive psychology is based on research, scientific in its approach, and has found 6 universal virtues from all cultures and developed 24 character strengths, which are categorized into these 6 virtues. So you have 3, 4, even 5 or 6 character strengths in a virtue. And let's see where we are. Last week we started covering the character strengths and the virtue of transcendence, which are appreciation of beauty, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. We covered appreciation of beauty and gratitude. This week we will cover the remaining 3, hope, humor, and spirituality. So the third character strength in this virtue is hope. How would you define hope? The character strength of hope has to do with positive expectations about the future. It involves optimistic thinking and focusing on good things to come. Hope is more than a feel-good emotion. It is an action-oriented strength involving agency, the motivation and confidence that goals can be reached, and also that many effective pathways can be devised in order to get to that desired future. Optimism is closely linked with having a particular explanatory style, how we explain the causes of bad events. People using an optimistic explanatory style interpret events as internal, stable, and global. Those using a pessimistic explanatory style interpret events as external, unstable, and specific. So internal sounds like taking responsibility, that you're part of this creation. And take a moment to find an affirmation you could use to increase your hope. Positive psychology's suggestion is, I am realistic and also full of optimism about the future, believing in my actions and feeling confident things will turn out well. Sounds like Gurudeva's teachings and affirmations. And based on research, take a moment to imagine a future in which one is bringing one's best self forward and everything is happening as one wishes. This should be visualized in a way that is pleasing and realistic. Then consider the character strengths needed in order to make that image a reality. And specific exercises. First one, Write an internal movie that features one of your goals. Picture yourself overcoming the obstacles, developing pathways around and through problems to reach your goal. Second exercise, write about a good event and why it will last and spread. How is this event linked to your actions? Third exercise, write about a bad event and how it will pass quickly. Detail how the effect of the event will be limited and who you are not completely. Key. Let's try that one again. Write about a bad event and how it will pass quickly. Detail how the effect of the event will be limited and who you are not completely to blame. Must be something wrong in that text. Must be how. Let's try it with how. Write about a bad event and how it will quickly pass. Detail how the effect of the event will be limited and how you are not completely to blame. And moving on, the fourth character strength is humor. How would you define humor? Humor means to recognize what is amusing in situations and to offer the lighter side to others. Humor is an important lubricant to social interactions and can contribute to team building or moving toward group goals. It's also a valuable method of coping with distressing situations. Humor involves the ability to make other people smile or laugh. It also means having a composed and cheerful view on adversity that allows an individual to see its light side and thereby sustain a good mood. Oh, interesting. I like that word, lubricant to social interactions. In other words, sometimes social interactions produce some stress or tension in the conversation. And that tension can be eliminated or prevented from happening in the first place by making sure the mood is light through the use of humor. Reflection. Take a moment to find an affirmation you could use to increase your humor. Positive psychology suggestion for the affirmation. I approach life playfully, making others laugh and finding humor in difficult and stressful times. Some research has found that keeping track of the humorous and funny things that happen each day is a way to boost this character strength. First exercise, think about a past event in which you used humor for your benefit and the benefit of others. Second exercise, each day make a conscious effort to be aware of your sense of humor, others' sense of humor, funny situations, and clever comments, and record them in a daily journal. Third exercise, watch a funny sitcom, movie, or read a comic. Funny blog daily. And the last character strength for today, spirituality. This is something we can easily relate to. So to remind us, we're in the virtue of transcendence, and one of the character qualities in that virtue is spirituality. How would you define spirituality? Spirituality has many dimensions. Some of these include meaning, purpose, life calling, beliefs about the universe, the expression of virtue, goodness, and practices that connect with the transcendent. Interesting, we'll see how they use the word transcendent. Spirituality has been defined consistently by scientists as the search for a connection with the sacred. Okay, connection with the sacred is what scientists say is the meaning of spirituality. The sacred might be that which is blessed, holy, revered, or particularly special. Comment. A few months ago, in explaining the topic of my October 2023 pub desk to some devotees, I used the phrase, the search for sacredness. I was surprised in preparing this keynote to find the same phrase used by psychologists. Here is the summary paragraph from that publisher's desk. In summary, Hinduism gives us a number of approaches to experiencing the divine. An important part of making progress on the path to moksha is encountering the transcendent on a regular basis. That practice will, over time, naturally deepen the awareness of our own inner sacredness, which is what spiritual unfoldment is all about. Interesting, very similar in wording. So spirituality can be secular or non-secular. Sacredness might be pursued as a search for a purpose in life or as a close relationship with something greater. Sacred might be experienced in the forgiveness offered by a child, a humble moment between a leader and a subordinate, an awe-inspiring sunset, profound experience during meditation or religious service, or the self-sacrificing kindness of a stranger. Wonderful examples. As a character strength, spirituality involves the belief that there is a dimension to life that is beyond human understanding. Some people don't connect this belief with the concept of a divinity and prefer to think of it in terms of a sense of meaning rather than spirituality. But in positive psychology, the terms are considered closely related. Spirituality is believed to describe both the private, intimate relationship between humans and the divine, and the range of virtues that result from the relationships. Spirituality is universal. Although the specific content of spiritual beliefs varies, all cultures have a concept of an ultimate transcendent sacred force. And reflection, take a moment to find an affirmation you could use to increase your spirituality. Positive psychology's suggestion is, I feel spiritual and believe in a sense of purpose or meaning in my life, and I see my place in the grand scheme of the universe and find meaning in everyday life. Sounds like one of Gurudeva's affirmations. And some thoughts on research. Choose a spiritual role model. The model could be someone from a book or movie, someone in the public eye, or a person in one's life. Reflect on how this person has conducted their life in a way that is spiritually driven and meaning-filled. Never heard that one before, meaning-filled. First exercise, create sacred moments in which you set aside time to just be with a special sacred object or space environment. Go to a temple. Space environment. Second exercise, build in spiritual tools as a regular practice. For example, prayer, meditation, exploring nature, or as a way of approaching life. Example, giving charity, showing compassion to less fortunate individuals. Third exercise, when experiencing trauma or a difficult situation, look for the deeper meaning and purpose of the experience. And that is our last slide for today. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you very much. Om. Om. Om.